Okay, good morning, everybody, and Hazak Baruch. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday morning, Erev Shabbat Kodesh. As we are studying together Perashat Mishpatim, today's class is sponsored anonymously for the Refuah Shalama of all of Am Yisrael. Today's class is also sponsored by the Haron family, Lilun Ushmat, David ben Ne'ima, Ruach Hashem, Tanihenu Began Eden, Hu V'chol B'nei Yisrael, HaShuchvim Imo, B'chlal Ha'ami V'Hasadichot, V'chen Yehi Ratzon, V'nomar Amen. Okay, everybody, here we go. Perashat Mishpatim is a packed perashah. Mishpatim means laws. The parasha is called laws. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim, and these are the laws. Last week, Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai to get the Torah, and this week he presents to them many of the laws. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim asher tasim lehem, and these are the laws, says God to Moses, that I want you to present to them. And if you look through the parasha, you'll find that in general, the mitzvot that are listed here are under the category of ben adam lachavero, what we call man to man. Yes? These are the laws that are given in this week's parasha. How to treat your slave, how to treat your workers, how to treat somebody who lent you something, how to treat an object, if you're a borrower or a lender or renting, or watching for somebody, okay, not to kidnap, all the laws, man to man, dealing with hitting people, dealing with your property that was damaged, or your property that damaged other people. If you have an ox, you got to watch the ox. If you see somebody that is struggling transporting their items, you have to help them. If you find a lost object, right? Many of the laws in our parasha, I think we could all agree to. They're not laws that are like, oh my God, this doesn't make sense. What's going on? They're civil laws. They're civil laws. They're laws that apply in day-to-day life. They're laws that I think everybody, Jewish or non-Jewish, religious or not religious, observant or non-observant, I think everybody could read these laws and kind of appreciate them for what they are and agree to them. There's nothing here that's hard to understand, hard to grasp, right? These are the laws that are given in our parasha. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim. Okay. What's hard to understand is the first letter of the parasha. The first letter is Vav. Ve'ele. And these. And I was always taught as a kid, you never start a book or a sentence, especially a book, you don't start it with the word and. You don't start a chapter with and. And so Rashi over here is scratching his head. Our commentaries are trying to figure out, what is ve'ele doing over here? What's the letter vav adding? Ve'ele ha-mishpatim. And these. What do you mean, and these? Take a look at what Rashi has to say, Rabotai, my friends. Rashi says, Kol makom shene'emar ele, anytime that the words ele without a vav is used, these are the laws. Pasalet harishonim is used to cut off the preceding section from what is being introduced over here. However, when the letter vav, what does vav do? Vav is like a hook. It even looks like a hook, right? Vav connects. Ve'ele mosif al harishonim. There is a connection here, says Rashi. The Torah is trying to tell us between our parasha and last week's parasha. Now we know last week's parasha, Parashat Yitro, was all about Matan Torah, Har Sinai. And look at what Rashi wants to tell us. Ma rishonim misinai. Just like last week was Har Sinai. Af elu misinai. So too, the laws in this week's parasha don't even think about suggesting that they're not from Sinai. They are from Sinai. Just like last week was Sinai, Af elu misinai, ve'ele ha-mishpatim. Now, this Rashi is a beautiful answer to the question, but it just has one flaw, one problem. Why in the world would I think that the parasha in this week was not from Sinai, that I would need the Torah to now come and say, ve'ele, by the way, it is from Sinai? You would have thought not, but it is. Why would I have thought not? The whole Torah is from Sinai. From the beginning till the end, we believe the whole book is Sinai. What is special about our parasha that Rashi feels the need, and the Torah feels the need really, to explain, no. By the way, The Torah, I want you to know, this parasha is from Har Sinai. Of course it's from Har Sinai. The whole Torah is from Har Sinai. Not only that, but we're still at Har Sinai. We didn't leave. Where else would we get it from? We didn't get it in Israel. We didn't get it in a different part of the desert. They're in Sinai. Yes, we got it from Sinai. We're still there. We've never left. The Torah is going to tell us later on that the Jews journeyed from Har Sinai, but not yet. And if that's the case, we should still feel and believe that these parashiyot, these chapters are given on Har Sinai. I don't need Rashi to confirm that. I don't need the Torah to remind me with the Vav that we're still at Har. I know it already. So what's the Vav? Why do I need to be reminded? What is the point? Need reinforcement. Af elu misinai. These two are from Har Sinai. And there are a couple of answers that I would like to suggest for today's class. The first answer is given by the Terumat Hadeshin. You know, there is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. The first Mishnah of Pirkei Avot is actually maybe one of the most important Mishnayot of the entire Torah. Okay? Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the order, the system of Mishnah and Talmud and Gemara, but basically, we have the Torah Shebichtav, the written book. We have the Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral book, the oral law. The Torah Shebe'al Peh was never written. That's why it's called the oral Torah. It was always given over mouth to mouth, rabbi to student, teacher to student, father to son, mother to daughter. It was always handed down until a couple thousand years ago. The rabbis realized that because of the exile, we're forgetting the Torah Shebe'al Peh, and it has to be put down pen to paper. And although this was a violation technically, but it was kind of like amputating the leg in order to save the patient's life. It's something that was necessary. It was something that had to be done. We had to do it, and that's what we did. Okay, so far so good. But what's very interesting, so take a look. We have the Mishnayot, and there's, just like we have Perashiyot, Bereshit, Noach, Lech, right? We also have Mishnayot. Now, Mishnayot are not written in chronological order. Even the Torah, there's what to say about the chronology of the Torah, but the Mishnayot definitely are not written about in order of, it's not a story, it's laws. They're just a bunch of laws. And each Mishnah, each Masechet, tractate, deals with different laws. So as an example, Masechet Berachot deals with all of the blessings, prayers. Masechet Shabbat, take a guess. What do you think Masechet Shabbat deals with? Very good. Shabbat. If you want to know anything about Shabbat, probably the answer will be in Masechet Shabbat, although it's not exclusively to Shabbat. There are many things in Masechet Shabbat that have to do with other things, right? And that's really why the codifiers of Halakha were brilliant in that they were able to take all the laws of Shabbat, some majority which were found in Masechet Shabbat, but some that are found in a Masechet Betzah, some that are found in a different Masechet, they were able to take them all and to put them in one new book of halakha. So that's really how the halakha evolves. But originally, where they were all in different tractates, mishnayot, masechtot, and very, very deep in, there's around, let's say, 60 books, 60 tractates, okay? I don't want to be exact here, but around in the 30s or 40s, okay? There's one called Masechet Avot. Just like you have Shabbat, you have one that's called Avot. Okay, very nice. Masechet Avot. What does Avot deal with? If Shabbat deals with Shabbat, and Rosh Hashanah, Masechet Rosh Hashanah deals with Rosh Hashanah, and Masechet Yoma deals with Yom Kippur, and Masechet Pesachim deals with Pesach. Okay, you see where we're going with this, right? So Masechet Gitin deals with get, divorce. Masechet Kiddushin deals with marriage. Okay, they're all simple names. What does Avot deal with? Avot deals with, actually, no laws. It's the only one of the 60 that doesn't have laws. It's very unique. It actually deals with morals, advice from our sages. That's why it's called Avot. Avot means fathers. It's teachings from our fathers about how to live a good life. Derech Eretz, proper conduct. Yeah? Beautiful words of advice, of different teachings from different rabbis, okay? Each one have a friend and, be like Aharon, have love, peace, right? Different beautiful ideas. We actually studied, we had a whole course on Pirkei Avot that Baruch Hashem we finished, we made a siyum, it was fantastic. And anyone that was in part of that class remembers how much wisdom the Torah has over there, right? Just about life, just practical advice. Be patient, don't jump to conclusions, things that today you would hear from a life coach. Okay, this was all given 2,000 years ago. Okay, this is called Masechet Avot. Now the first Mishnah, if you have one on you, please open it up. Okay, I'm going to pull mine out as well. The first Mishnah of Masechet Avot is actually one of the most important Mishnayot of the entire Torah, of the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh. The first Mishnah reads the following, okay? Here we go. We're opening to Mishnah. We're going to go to Avot. First one. Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Moshe receives the Torah at Har Sinai. That we knew. And then what happened? Umsara leYehoshua. Then he gave it to Joshua. We knew that too. Moshe, he made Yehoshua, he gave him everything. Yehoshua, what did he do with it? Eventually, before he died, he gave it to the Zekenim. The Zekenim, the elders, gave it to the prophets, to the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im eventually gave it to Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, members of the Great Assembly. We know who was on that one. They were members like Mordechai and Shimon HaTzadik. Okay? They were the 120 members. Then, from them, direct teacher to student, you have Shimon HaTzadik and Antignos and Yossi ben Yoezer, Yossi ben Yochanan, Yehoshua. Eventually it was Shemaiah, Naftalion, Shammai, Hillel, all the way down to us. If anyone asks you, how do you know that what you're doing here today is correct? How do you know that the Torah that you're studying, how do you know that this is what tefillin looks like? How do you know that this is how you're supposed to keep Shabbat? Very simple. Because this is how my father told me, who heard it from his father, from his, all the way back to Yehoshua, to Moshe Rabbeinu. We have an uninterrupted link of father to son, rabbi to student. Uninterrupted. For over 3,000 years. Every single year there has been a seder where a father and a mother have sat down their children and they've given over the seder to their kids the way they got it from their parents. And that's uninterrupted. That's a link, direct link. Chain. And we are the ones in charge of giving it over to our kids. Can't break that chain. Don't break the chain. Please don't. And our kids will then give it. So we're an important part of the link. We're another link in the chain from Moshe down to the end of time. We're in the middle. And what happens if you break one? It gets lost. Or at least from our descendants it will get lost. So we have to make sure that we are being that strong link. One of my friends, good friend of mine, out in LA, just had a beautiful baby. He told me how it was so amazing to hold that baby in his hands and to realize that he is now responsible to give over our Mesorah, our tradition, to that child. She is the next beautiful link in the chain. It's an amazing concept. So anyone asks you, how do you know Judaism is correct? How do you know that what you're doing is correct? Very easy. First, Mishna and Pirkei Avot. Because all the way from Moshe till today, we know exactly where the Torah was, who was the one responsible for the information, and who was giving it over. Moshe, Yehoshua, the elders, right? Shemuel Hanavi, all of these direct link. There hasn't been a single time that we've unsure what happened. There is no missing link. Okay? Beautiful. The only question is, why is this Mishnah here in chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot? This is a very important Mishnah, don't you think? This is what gives credence, validity to our entire Torah. Shouldn't this Mishnah be all the way in the first Masechet? This Mishnah should be how we start off Shas. We should start with before everything. Before I tell you Berachot, before I tell you Shabbat, before I tell you about Eruv and Pesach. The first Mishnah. What you're learning is important and it's real. And you know how it's real? Because Moshe gave it to Yehoshua, who gave it. Da-da, 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 da-da. But we don't tell you that all the way back in the beginning. You would have no idea if what you're learning is real. We tell it to you here, Masechet Avot. And the question is, why wait? Why is it only being said over here? And one of the most amazing answers is given by the Bartenura. And the Bartenura says, take a look. Since after all, this tractate is not about commandments from the Torah. You won't find any commandments here. You won't find how to keep Shabbat, or how to keep kosher, or how to keep tefillin, or tzitzit, or mezuzah. Nothing here about that. Rather, kulam musarim umidot. It's entirely morals and principles. V'chachmei umot ha'olam, and you have to know that the wise men of other nations of the world, gamken chibru sfarim, they also compiled books on ethics. Yeah? Go out there and read. What do they have? You have a lot of books, a lot of wisdom. You go to a Tony Robbins class, you read a Dale Carnegie book. There's a lot of wisdom about life, about morals, about just self-help from the world. Not only Jews. Chachmei umot ha'olam, the wise men of the world, gamken chibru sfarim, kemo shebadu milibam bedarkei hamusar, that they made up from their hearts. They fabricated of their hearts concerning a moral path, how a person should behave with his fellow, right? So we have books of ethics, and they have books of ethics. Lefichach hitchil hatana b'masechet zo. Therefore, it was super important that we begin our Masechet Avot. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, with this idea of our Mesorah, our heritage being passed down from father to son, father to son. Lomar lecha, to tell you, shehamidot vehamusarim, that all of the laws and all of the codes of morals and ethics and principles that are in our Masechet, lo badu otam chachmei haMishna milibam. What you're reading here, my friends, Masechet Avot, was not made up. It wasn't fabricated from their hearts. Ela af elu ne'emru beSinai. Even these laws of morals and ethics were given at Har Sinai. And what the Bartenura here is telling us is something fascinating. And that is, everybody agrees. Where do you go if you want to know the laws of Shabbat? You got to go to the Torah. Where do you go if you want to know the laws of kosher? You got to go to the laws of Torah. Where do you go if you want to know the laws of family purity? You got to go to the Torah. Where do you go for the laws of mezuzah, tefillin, sefer Torah? You got to look in the Torah. Where else are you going to find it? All of these laws that are meant to God, you need the Torah for. But where are you going to go for morals? Where do you go for ethics? Where do you learn all of these principles from? And our Torah is telling us, you got to go to the Torah. Even these, especially these, one should not come to the false conclusion that when it comes to mitzvot, to the commandments that are meant to God, I need the Torah for that. But when it comes to the mitzvot that are man to man, those are logical. Everyone knows you don't kill. Everyone knows you don't steal. Everyone knows be a good guy. Everyone knows help someone find, return a lost item to its original owner. It makes sense to help your friend with his donkey. And one might have thought that Moshe made these up from his head. One might have thought that all of these rabbis were just giving you sound advice that they came up with. And therefore, says the Bartenura, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. You have to know everything you're reading, even in this Masechet Avot, is also from Har Sinai. None of this was a concoction from their minds. They're not made up by man. And now we go back, my friends, to our Rashi. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim. And these are the Mishpatim. Says Rashi, Ma'elu miSinai, af'elu miSinai. Just like the first commandments of last week were from Sinai, af'elu miSinai, so to our parasha is all from Har Sinai. We asked, why would I think not? Of course it's from Sinai. The whole Torah is from Sinai. But the answer is, says the Trumat Hadeshin. But don't forget, what is our parasha dealing with? Our parasha is all about the laws about man to man, the laws about moral conduct, ethics, the rational, the logical, mitzvot ben adam lachavero. And on these, one might have falsely concluded that these were not given by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These were given by Moshe because they're sound advice. They make sense. So maybe Moshe is the one that told us, hey, when you see someone with a donkey, you have to help them. Maybe Moshe is the one that said, if you see somebody that's struggling, give him a hand, give him a loan, give him some money. Maybe it was Moshe that made it up. No, sorry. These also and these, Vav is adding, just like last week was from Har Sinai. So too this week is from Har Sinai. Even these laws that are man to man. Don't falsely conclude that Moshe made them up. No such thing. No, my friends. Even these laws and what the Torah is telling us, that we need Torah even for ethics, even for our moral conduct. Now you may say, but what do you mean, Rabbi? Why do I need the Torah for that? It's common sense. It's common sense. Just look out there in the world. Everyone agrees to these laws, that you should help, that you should return, that you should lend. I don't need the Torah for that. It's common sense. And the answer is, my favorite answer to this question is what Einstein said. Einstein said that common sense is really just a collection of all the prejudices that one has acquired by the age of 18. That is an amazing line. Just think about that line for a minute. Common sense are all the prejudices that one has acquired by the age of 18. Common sense, what Einstein is saying, is not really common sense. What's common sense to you is not always common sense to him. There are many people out there in the world that rob. It's common sense. You don't take someone's things. But you know what? If you ask a thief, what are you doing? They'll give you a whole logic to what they're doing. Common sense is really how we're raised. If the world today agrees that you don't kill, you don't steal, there are laws that are just out of bounds, you know what? I just want you to know something. That wasn't always the case. It wasn't always the case that you didn't kill. There were many societies back then that killed if they didn't want, or if they needed something, they would steal. The fact that the world today agrees with the Bartanura is teaching us, the fact that the world today agrees on so many of these civil laws that we say, oh, it makes sense. Look, you don't kill, you don't steal, everyone agrees. But maybe that was actually part of the influence that the Torah had on the entire world. Maybe it's only like that today because we have a Torah. You have to know, when the Torah was given 3,000, 4,000 years ago, it was actually not acceptable. It wasn't a given that you don't kill. Remember the Midrash. God came and said to Esav, do you want the Torah? And Esav said, what does it say? It says, don't kill. And Esav's like, no, what are you talking about? Of course you kill. Yishmael, you don't steal. What do you mean? Of course you steal. Moav, no immorality. What do you mean, no immorality? What kind of laws are these? The Torah was very radical for its time. It wasn't a normal thing when the Torah was given, all of these laws. Today, 3,000 years later, because of the influence Judaism and the Torah had through Jews and through Christianity, that is why these laws are spread out. Remember, the first Christian was a Jew. Yeshu. All of these laws that he had, they came from the Torah. So yes, today we look around, we say it's obvious, it's common sense. But that's common sense because the world today is influenced. Look how far the Torah influenced the world that we live in. And therefore, that's the first answer to the Trumat Hadeshin, of the Trumat Hadeshin. It's an amazing idea. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim. And these are the laws. Maharishonim misinai. Just like last week, they were from Har Sinai. Afelu misinai. These are also from Sinai. Don't think that just because they're obvious and logical, that they were just made up by man. They were invented by the minds of men. No. These were given af elu misinai. So too, these are from Har Sinai. Beautiful. So far, so good. So far, so good. Okay, here we go. Next answer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'ro. Okay. The next and final answer for today's class that I'd like to share with you is given by Rav Yitzchak Hutner. And he has something very important to say. Rav Hutner says that unfortunately people make a big mistake. Some people have a distorted view and they think that mitzvot that are, you know what, let me preface with a question, okay? Okay, I'm going to ask a question. I'm actually going to invite you to please type in your response. Would love to hear what everyone here has to say, okay? If you feel embarrassed, you can do it privately. But let me ask you, what does someone religious look like? Just describe in one word. What does a religious person look like? Describe somebody religious. Which commandment would you say they need to keep? Right? Somebody religious. Right? Somebody religious, someone who keeps Shabbat. They're religious. Somebody who keeps kosher, even on winter vacation. They're religious. Somebody who keeps to themselves. Someone who is sanua, modest in how they dress. They're religious. Okay? So these are all beautiful answers. But the problem is that unfortunately, says Rav Yitzchak Hutner, that sometimes people make this mistake and they think that to be religious means that you excel in the area of man to God, whereas in the area of man to man is not as important. You keep Shabbat, you're religious. What if the guy's not honest? Is honesty a less mitzvah and a less of a litmus test of religion than Shabbat? Is lying, is being a good person less religious than someone who keeps kosher? People think today, says Rav Yitzchak Hutner, that mitzvot that are meant to God is part of our religious duties. But mitzvot that are meant to man, that doesn't fall under the area of religion. Someone religious is a man who's close to God. Someone who's maybe not so close to people. So he's a mean guy, but he's a religious guy. And says the Torah, no, sir, that is not the case. Being good man to man is equally important as being good in man to God. Ma elu misinai, af elu misinai. Don't think for a second that being a nasty person is only in the realm and only concerns you and man, and it doesn't affect who you are as vis-a-vis a person that serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No such thing. Both are from Sinai. Being good to God is from Sinai, and being good to man is as equally important from Har Sinai. And if a person, chas v'shalom, is lacking in the area of man to man, it's the same as a person who's lacking in the area of man to God. And therefore, says Rav Yitzchak Hutner, Ma elu misinai, af elu misinai. They're both equally important, and one should not allow oneself to be fooled into thinking, okay, I got to work on it, but at least I'm a religious person. They're both equally in the area and in the realm of religion. Of course, no one's perfect. We don't judge people. But a person for themselves has to know that if I'm lacking in a certain area, whether it's ben adam l'makom, man to God, or ben adam l'chavero, man to man, it's part of my religious duty to shape that up. They once asked Rav Yisrael Salant, listen to the story, my friends, this is one of the most amazing stories you'll ever hear. They once asked Rav Yisrael Salant right before Pesach, Rabbi, he wasn't able to come with them, so they said, Rabbi, what hidurim, which precautions should we take? Which areas should we accept more stringencies upon ourselves when we're going to bake the matzot? You know, most of us buy our matzot, but there are many people that go and bake it themselves. They go to the factory, they rent it for an hour, and they bake the matzot themselves. So they asked Rav Salanta, how should we act when we're baking the matzot? Which chumrot, which extra preventative cautions, steps should we take in baking the matzot? I don't know if you realize how complicated it is to make matzot. And there's no end to how many extra fences you could make. You bake the matzah, you roll out the dough, right? And then you're making the holes or whatever it is, and then you're putting it on the roll, and then you're putting it in the oven. Now, that last step, putting it in the oven, is done by a professional, okay? But many of the things before, they're done by amateurs. They're done by regular people. And sometimes, there could be dough stuck in between the pins, between each batch of baking matzot. And so it's very important to remove any dough that's stuck in there, because that dough is going to be more than 18 minutes. That dough is chametz. You understand what I mean? So, and time is of the essence when you're baking matzah. I don't know if you ever go, it could be a good idea. Go, they're going to start soon actually. They probably started already, right? But you should go in, just see how they make matzot. It's fast, it's hectic. They asked Rav Salanta, which hidurim, which extras should we keep when we go to bake the matzot? And Rav Salanta said to them, the lady who cleans in between each shift, the lady who cleans the tools, the utensils, she's a widow. Be very careful how you speak to her. That, for Rav Salanta, was the hidur that he was expecting them to keep on Pesach. And what Rav Salanta is teaching us is that being nice to a widow, being careful how we talk, is as equally important to Hashem as how we bake our matzot. Now again, chas v'shalom, no one should think, so if I'm a good person, then I don't have to worry about eating matzah. That's a very foolish conclusion. That's not what he's saying. You need both, but you need both. Meaning, don't think it's enough if you have good matzahs, but then you're going to be nasty to the people, and you're going to cut people online to try to obtain them, and you're going to scream at the widow who was there, come on, clean faster, what are you doing? Don't forget, all of those are also from the Torah. Those are also Ben Adam Lamakom. Those are also from Sinai. Ma'elu mi Sinai, af'elu mi Sinai. Those are also important. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu, after he gives the Jewish people the Torah, please take a look at the end of our parasha for 1 minute. Parasha Mishpatim. After he gives them all of these laws of man to man, mainly man to man, right? Okay. Chapter 24. Moshe comes, he gives them the Torah, he writes them down. Vayiven Mizbeach, Pasuk 4, and he builds an altar. Ushtem Esrei Matzeva, with 12 stones, for the 12 tribes of Israel. The young lads offer sacrifices. Now take a look at this Pasuk, Pasuk 6. Vayikach Moshe Chatzi Hadam. Moshe now takes half of the blood, because there's a lot of blood, right? A lot of animals, a lot of blood. Moshe takes half of the blood, Vayasem ba'aganot, and he puts them in basins. V'chatzi Adam zarak ala mizbeach, and he throws half of the blood on the mizbeach. Okay? And look at what Rashi says. Rashi says, the word half, chatzi, what does half mean? Half means half, right? Half doesn't mean 49-51. Half means 50-50. Okay, I want everyone to do something right now. If you have a cup of water or a cup of coffee, whatever you're drinking, or a cup of scotch, whatever you're on right now, okay? I want you to take your liquid, and I want you to split it in another cup. 50-50. Good luck. Exactly, okay? If you have kids, you know how hard this is, trying to split the candy down the middle. Hey, it's not fair, his is bigger, hers is more, why did she get, right? But look at what the Torah says. Moshe took half the blood, and he put it in the basin, and the other half he threw on the Mizbeach. Says Rashi, Michil Ko, how could someone split perfectly, 50-50? Says Rashi, Malach ba v'chileko. Oh, an angel came and divided it. Wow. This is a Rashi for the books. What exactly is the point, my friends? Why is it so important that an angel should come and split the blood 50-50? And if it was 51-49, would it be the end of the world? Does it have to be chetzi, 50-50? And I saw over here an amazing idea from Rabbi Isaac Bernstein, Rabbi Yitzchak Bernstein, and he says, the whole point is that the two halves of blood, 50-50, correspond to the two halves of the luchot, the right side and the left side. And the right side are the mitzvot that are man to God. And the left side correspond to the mitzvot that are man to man. Look at the ones that are on the right side. Believe in God, no other gods, don't swear in God's name. Shabbat, the left, even respecting parents is really because that's how we come to respect God. And then the left side, don't kill, don't steal, no adultery, don't covet, don't testify falsely. These are in the areas of mitzvot ben adam lachavero. And therefore, splitting the blood into two halves symbolizes that we have two halves of the Torah. We have the mitzvot that are man to man, and we have the mitzvot that are man to God. And you know how they have to be split? 50-50. Equally. Chas v'shalom for somebody to come and say that one half is superior over the other. Either half. And there are unfortunately people that say one half is more important, and people say that the other half is more important, and both are incorrect. Chetzi. To be an observant Jew, to be a religious Jew, we are obligated to observe the right half and the left half. Ma'elu misinai, af'elu misinai. Just like these were given by God, so too these were given by God. And therefore, to answer the question, what does a religious Jew look like? The same way we would answer, keep Shabbat, we must answer, is honest. We must answer, helps people. We must answer, gives interest-free loans. Unfortunately, there are many people today that disregard that half, and they're very nasty in business, and they're very dishonest when it comes to dealing with people. And when it comes to interpersonal, but when it comes to God, they're front and center. And they're right there, and they're praying every day with a minyan 3 times, and they're learning, and they're doing. But when it comes to the left side, it goes down the drain, because that's not important. But and they kid themselves and they fool themselves into thinking that they're very religious. Of course, it's not all or nothing. Of course, just because they're not keeping the left half, they shouldn't not keep the right half. Of course, we should do whatever we can. But a person shouldn't fool themselves and rely on the fact that they're very strong on the right side as a way of now easing their conscience that they're lax on the left side. Both are equally important. If a person kept Shabbat but ate pork, he would never fool himself into thinking, I'm a religious Jew. Right? I keep Shabbat. I'm a religious Jew. What are you talking about? You eat pork. He would never fool himself. But sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking that if I keep the right side, but I don't keep the left side, I'm a religious Jew. That's the point of Rav Hutner. Such a thing is incorrect. And by the way, we know that the Torah was given with the 10 Commandments, but they were all given at the same time. The Torah 10 Commandments were actually given twice. They were first given all at once. The Torah says, Ele hadevarim, these are the things that Hashem gave to Moshe. And then it was repeated again, each one alone. And the idea of here again, why was this necessary, says Rav Yitzchak Horowitz? Because some people may say that they were given in order of importance. So believing in God and Shabbat, and then worry about don't steal. And then worry about being honest, right? And says Rav Yitzchak Horowitz, this is not the case. This was not the case. The truth is, they were all given at once. And that was very important to show us and remind us that they're all equal. And then we regave them, and there had to be someone that was first, someone that was second. Maybe there's discussion of why the 10 Commandments were in that order. But make no mistake, they were all given first at once. Kulan, they were all equal. Ma'elu misinai, af'elu misinai. What a powerful, powerful idea. What an important message. And it's not, I don't think it's coincidental that Rav Yisrael Salanter, who was the father of the Musar movement, The fact that there's so much study today about ethics and man to man, that today was not always. Unfortunately, there was a time when many people disregarded that area. And in yeshivas even, they were studying very strong Talmud and very strong laws of your ox and laws of kosher and laws of Shabbat, but they were disregarding Masechet Avot. They were disregarding the left side. They were disregarding the other half of the blood. And Rav Yisrael Salant is the one that instilled in yeshivot musar, the importance, the necessity to study every day how to be a good person. The fact that you have in yeshivas today 20, 30-minute musar every day, reading from a book, whatever book it is, but reading every day from a sefer and studying musar on your own, how to be a better person, that wasn't always. There used to be a time that no one studied musar. Actually, when he introduced it, he got a lot of fights. He wasn't appreciated for what he was trying to do in the beginning. A lot of people were against it. But today it's Baruch Hashem, it made its way. And Rav Yisrael Salanta, maybe it's not a coincidence that his yortzeit always falls out this week. Parashat Mishpatim. The parasha that deals with the laws of man to man is what Rav Yisrael Salanta was front and center about, always emphasizing the importance. And so, these are the two answers to our parasha. These are the two sides of our coin. Ve'ele. So far, look what we learned, my friends, from one letter. How powerful one letter, Vav. Ve'ele. One letter we learned so much from. One letter, Vav, and these are the laws. Says Rashi, Ma'elu miSinai, just like the first half are from Sinai. Af elu miSinai, so too these are from Har Sinai. And we asked, why would we think that our parasha is not from Har Sinai? Of course it's from Har Sinai. And the answer, says Rashi, two answers. Trumat Hadeshen explains, because one would have thought that since they're logical, we can engineer them from our own minds. We can think of them and come to conclusions on our own of what's moral, what's ethical. And says the first answer, no. Even for ethics, we need Sinai. But the flip side of the coin is not to think for a second that they are less important than the other ones that are on the right side, that are man to God, that are ben adam makom, to be observant, to be religious, to be a good Jew. We need both. We need both the right side, we need the left side, and one should never be at the expense of the other. Okay, everybody, we'll stop over here. We should be zocheh to accept both halves fully, to realize their source, and to come ever closer to Hashem. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.